Title: The Second Glass. Part 1: The Suspicion. Elena used to believe in happy endings. A successful architect in her mid-30s, she had built not only skyscrapers but also what she thought was an unshakable marriage. Her husband, Daniel, was a charming corporate lawyer with a magnetic smile and a subtle way of making people feel special. For nearly a decade, they were the kind of couple others envied, until Elena noticed the lipstick. It wasn't hers. At first, she gave him the benefit of the doubt. A hug from a coworker? A brush of someone's cheek? Maybe. But when she found a hotel receipt in his jacket pocket, dated 2 weeks ago when he had claimed to be in Boston for a seminar, the doubt became a shadow that followed her everywhere. Elena didn't confront him, not yet. Instead, she started documenting everything. Late nights, changes in cologne, unexplained credit card charges. She even hired a private investigator. What came back was worse than she imagined. Her husband was having an affair with her best friend, Julia. Part 2: The mask drops. The betrayal crushed her. Julia had been with her through college heartbreaks, promotions, the death of her father. She had stood beside Elena at her wedding, smiling as Elena walked down the aisle to Daniel. And now, she was sleeping with him. Elena spiraled, for a week. Then, something shifted. She looked at herself in the mirror, tear-streaked and hollow, and whispered, "No more." She would not confront them. Not yet. That would give them the satisfaction of guilt, of closure. Elena didn't want closure. She wanted them to burn. Part 3: The Game Begins. Elena began to play a long game. To Daniel, she remained the perfect wife. Loving, patient, affectionate. She asked about his day, kissed him goodnight, and even planned a surprise weekend getaway for their anniversary. All the while, she secretly recorded his phone calls, tracked his location, and gathered more evidence. Each lie he told was documented and added to her growing arsenal. To Julia, she played the friend who was a little distant lately, but just stressed from work. She asked her out for drinks, laughed at her stories, and even cried on her shoulder about how Daniel seemed more distant these days. The irony wasn't lost on her. Then came the first move. She anonymously sent photos of Julia and Daniel together to Julia's husband, Mark. The fallout was immediate and explosive. Mark filed for divorce within days, blindsided and furious. Julia had no idea where the photos came from. Daniel, meanwhile, grew more paranoid, sensing Elena was distant, but couldn't pin it down. Elena watched them crumble. Part 4: The Masterstroke. It wasn't enough. Elena knew Daniel valued two things above all: his image and his career. So she started leaking emails, carefully edited but damning, between Daniel and a fictitious client that hinted at unethical practices. She sent them to his firm's compliance officer under a fake name. Within weeks, Daniel was under internal investigation. Rumors swirled. His promotion was put on hold. He came home one night, disheveled and defeated, and finally admitted something was wrong. "Elena, I think someone's trying to ruin me." She held his hand, kissed his cheek, and said softly, "You're just tired, love." Part 5: The Reckoning. 1 month later, the investigation concluded. Daniel wasn't fired, yet, but his name was tainted. Clients started backing away. He was no longer the golden boy. Meanwhile, Julia's life had unraveled. Her husband gone, her reputation in shambles, her mental health in decline. She reached out to Elena, desperate for understanding. Elena agreed to meet her at a cafe. Julia cried, begged for forgiveness, and said she didn't know how to fix anything. Elena looked at her over the rim of her glass and said, "Do you remember what you told me the night I met Daniel?" Julia blinked. "What?" "You said, he's a keeper. Just don't let someone else take him." Elena smiled, cold and calm. "You didn't take him. I gave him to you. And I hope he ruined you like he tried to ruin me." She stood, dropped cash on the table, and left Julia speechless and sobbing behind her. Part 6, Rebirth. Elena filed for divorce 2 weeks later. Daniel begged, pleaded, promised to change. She handed him the dossier of everything she knew, all the proof, all the lies. His face turned pale. He looked like a man who had just seen death. She didn't ask for a penny more than she was owed. She didn't want his money. She wanted his silence, his shame, and his memory to sting every time he looked in the mirror. After the court date, she went home, poured herself a glass of wine, and stood by the window. She had burned down the house of lies they had built, and from the ashes, she would rise. Alone, but free. Word count, 300 words, is almost equal to 20,000 characters with spaces. Let me know if you want a sequel, a version from Daniel's or Julia's perspective, or want to adapt this into a screenplay or novella. ChatGPT. Absolutely, here's the continuation of The Second Glass, picking up after Elena's rebirth. In this next part, she begins to rebuild her life, but the ghosts of the past aren't done with her yet. Part 7, The Ghost in the Mirror. It had been 6 months since the divorce. Elena had moved into a high-rise apartment downtown. The place was minimal, clean, nothing like the house she and Daniel once shared. She filled it with art, not memories. There were no photo frames, no wedding souvenirs, no echoes of the life she left behind. She spent her mornings running along the river, her evenings sketching blueprints for a new boutique hotel in Florence. She laughed more now. Real, deep laughter. The kind that cracked her open and stitched her back together. But sometimes, at night, she'd still hear his voice in her head. Elena, you're imagining things. Julia and I are just friends. You're being paranoid. Gaslighting, she'd later learn, could echo like a ghost. But Elena was no longer haunted, she was hunting something more. Closure? Power? Or maybe just a sense that justice had truly been served. And then, one morning, she received the email. From j.wright@unknownmail.com. Subject, he's not done yet. Attached was a screenshot, Daniel, sitting at a bar with a much younger woman, laughing. The timestamp was last Friday. The sender? Anonymous. Elena didn't reply. But she didn't delete it either. Part 8, The Return. 3 days later, she ran into Julia at a networking gala. It was awkward. Julia looked thinner, pale, like she'd been hollowed out from the inside. Her voice was fragile. You look good, she said softly. Thanks, Elena replied coolly. You look different. There was a long pause. The room buzzed around them, full of polished smiles and shallow compliments. Julia finally said, he's been calling me again. After everything. Like none of it ever happened. Elena tilted her head. Are you surprised? I thought, maybe I was different. Elena let the silence stretch before answering. You were never different, Julia. You were just next. Part 9, The Web Widens. Curiosity got the best of her. Elena started digging again, not out of pain this time, but out of calculation. She discovered Daniel had left his firm shortly after their divorce. He was now working at a startup, representing shady investors from overseas. He was still charming, still slippery, but now more reckless. And there were whispers, new women. Younger, more naive. He was dating the interns, manipulating clients, blurring ethical lines. She could have walked away. She had won. But something inside her itched. So, she started leaving breadcrumbs. An anonymous tip to the Better Business Bureau. A leaked recording of Daniel promising favors to a city inspector. A staged accidental meeting between Daniel's newest girlfriend and Julia at a yoga class. The dominoes started falling. Part 10, Full Circle. Daniel showed up at Elena's door one evening. She didn't expect him, but she wasn't surprised, either. He looked older. Not aged, but worn down. hair thinning, smile cracked at the edges. "I just wanted to talk," he said. She didn't invite him in. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "I lost everything," he said. "You ruined me." "No," Elena said calmly. "You ruined yourself. I just turned on the lights." He looked like he wanted to argue. Then he just deflated. "I loved you, you know." She raised a brow. "You loved control. You loved the mirror I held up to you. But you shattered it when it stopped reflecting what you wanted to see." He stared at her like he didn't recognize her. Maybe he didn't. This Elena wasn't his anymore. Never would be. As he turned to leave, she said quietly, "By the way, tell Julia I said hi." Part 11, The Second Glass. Months passed. Elena traveled to Florence, to Kyoto, to Cape Town. She stood on rooftops and watched the sun rise over unfamiliar cities. She fell in love again, this time with herself, with the quiet power of healing. And sometimes, when she poured herself a glass of wine, she would pour a second. She'd set it down across from her on the table. A reminder of the woman she used to be. Of the woman who survived. And of the woman who would never be betrayed again. The second glass always remained full. Untouched. Epilogue, The Woman in the Glass. It was winter again. The streets of Florence shimmered with frost, the cafe windows fogged with warmth and murmured conversations. Elena sat beneath a worn awning, sipping espresso. She wasn't waiting for anyone. Not anymore. She simply liked watching the world pass without feeling the urge to chase it. Her phone buzzed. A news alert. Local startup exec arrested amidst fraud investigation. Daniel's face stared back at her from the screen, tired, drawn, handcuffed. The headline detailed a tangled web of embezzlement, harassment claims, and falsified investor documents. His partners had turned on him. So had his latest girlfriend. Elena read it twice. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. The fall had finally come, not with screams, but with silence. She turned off the screen and slid the phone away. The city buzzed around her, Vespas whining through alleys, the faint scent of bread from a nearby forno, the distant toll of bells. Across from her, the second glass of wine waited. She lifted her own and clinked it gently against the untouched one. "To the ghosts," she whispered. "And the freedom they leave behind." She stood, left a few euros on the table, and walked off into the morning. No backward glance. No lingering grief. Behind her, the wine on the other side of the table stayed full. Unclaimed. Unwanted. Unneeded.